By the time Daniel was a man, his smell carried through the street. Still, his mother's eyes burned with fear whenever water came near him. No washing, no rain, no river. Don't touch him with that water. Ruth screamed, pulling her son behind her like he was still a child. The crowd stared, sickened. How could a mother forbid her own grown son from ever bathing, even when the dust of many seasons clung to his skin? She wasn't protecting his body, she was protecting his soul. Welcome back. As you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and also share with your friends. The whispers always began when Daniel passed by. At 16, he was tall and lean, but there was something about him that made people pause. His skin never looked freshly washed, his hair never carried the smell of soap, and yet, strangely, he never seemed filthy either. The village women shook their heads whenever he walked past in his old Ankara shirt and faded trousers. Ruth has cursed that boy, some would mutter under their breath. What kind of mother refuses to let water touch her child? Others would ask, their voices sharp with judgment. Daniel himself lived with the sting of those words every day. In school, his classmates teased him. Some pinched their noses when he entered the room. Others whispered cruel nicknames behind his back. He clenched his fists but said nothing, because deep inside, even he didn't fully understand why his mother always stopped him whenever he reached for a bucket of water. It wasn't as though Ruth didn't know how much her son suffered. She saw the sadness in his eyes, the way he avoided the other boys, the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking. But whenever he confronted her, her answer was always the same. Daniel, trust me. You must never let water touch your body. Not now. Not ever. One evening, when the sun had dipped and shadows stretched long across the dusty compound, Daniel had finally snapped. Mother, he shouted, his voice cracking with frustration. I am not a child anymore. People laugh at me. They call me dirty. I cannot live like this. Why won't you just let me bathe like everyone else? Ruth's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her wrapper. Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them back. Michael, her husband, sat silently in the corner, his eyes heavy with the weight of a secret he wished he could erase. The truth burned in their chests, but neither of them had the courage to tell Daniel. Not yet. Not when revealing it too soon could destroy him. That night, while Daniel slept restlessly, Ruth sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Michael joined her, his face lined with worry. How much longer can we keep this from him? Ruth whispered. Michael shook his head. If he knows too soon, he may not be able to carry it. And if he disobeys, his voice trailed off, thick with dread. What no one in the village knew, what even Daniel himself did not know, was that his life had been bargained for before he could even walk. On the day of his birth, Michael had faced a choice that would haunt them forever. And because of that choice, Ruth could never let water touch her son's skin. The following morning, Daniel woke to the sound of boys laughing outside the compound. He peered through the window and saw them pointing at him. There goes Ruth's unwashed son, one shouted. Careful, don't touch him or you'll turn to stone. Another mocked, sending the group into cruel laughter. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to fight, to scream, to prove he was just like them. But he couldn't. Not when his own mother held him back from the simplest thing every boy knew, touching water. That afternoon, when the taunting became unbearable, he stormed into the house. Mother, I am going to the stream. You can stop me if you like, but I am not a child anymore. Ruth rushed to block the doorway, her hands spread wide, her eyes blazing with fear. Daniel, no. You must never let water touch your skin. Please, my son. You don't know what you are asking for. He froze. Her voice shook, not with anger but with a kind of terror that unsettled him. Why, mother? What is it about water? What will happen to me? Michael, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. His voice was low, almost a whisper. Daniel, there are things you don't yet understand. When you were born, we were given a warning. A warning that water is not your friend. Daniel turned to him, disbelief written across his face. A warning? From who? Why? Michael's lips parted, but he could not bring himself to say more. Ruth shot him a sharp look, silently begging him to hold his tongue. Daniel's frustration only grew. That night, Daniel lay awake, his mind racing. He thought of the coolness of the stream, the way other boys splashed each other and washed freely. He imagined stepping into the water himself. What was the worst that could happen? In the next room, Ruth sat rocking in silence. Michael paced the floor, his heart heavy. He remembered that night 16 years ago, when the midwives had wiped the sweat from Ruth's brow and placed their newborn in his arms. The joy of that moment had quickly turned into fear when the old woman with clouded eyes entered their hut uninvited. Her words had never left him. If water touches this boy, his soul will not belong to you. Guard him, or you will lose him forever. And so they had guarded him, fighting shame, enduring whispers, carrying the burden in silence. But now, as Daniel grew older, the secret pressed harder against the walls of their home. How long before he disobeyed? How long before he discovered for himself what they had tried so desperately to hide? By the time Daniel turned 17, the whispers in the village had become louder. Mothers pulled their children away when he passed. Girls laughed at him behind their palms. Men shook their heads whenever his name came up. Imagine, a grown man who has never touched water. One farmer sneered at the marketplace. If that were my son, I would force him into the river myself. The gossip reached Daniel's ears every day, stabbing his pride deeper. He no longer walked through the village with his head high. He avoided gatherings, choosing instead to linger by the edge of the forest where nobody could see him. But one afternoon, when he returned from cutting firewood, he overheard two young men talking near the compound. "Have you seen his skin? It is dry like old leather. They say his mother keeps him like that because she is a witch." Daniel's hands tightened around the firewood bundle until the sticks snapped. He dropped them on the ground and stormed into the house. "Mother," he shouted, "enough of this. People are calling you a witch because of me. Because of your secret. If you don't tell me why I cannot touch water, then I swear, I will walk into the river tonight." Ruth froze where she sat today. Her body trembled, but she did not cry. Slowly, she stood and placed her hands on his shoulders. Her voice was heavy. "Daniel, listen to me. The night you were born, an old woman came to this house. She was no ordinary woman. She said water would claim you if it ever touched your skin. Your father and I have kept you safe since that day." Daniel pulled away, anger flashing in his eyes. "So all my suffering is because of a stranger's words? An old woman? You mean to tell me my life has been ruined by a superstition?" Michael, who had been silent in the corner, stepped forward. "Son, I saw her with my own eyes. She spoke things she could not have known. The scar on your chest, she described it before you were even unwrapped. She was not ordinary. Her words were not empty." Daniel's chest heaved with rage. He felt trapped between shame and confusion. His fists clenched, and he stormed out of the hut without another word. That night, Ruth lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the mud hut. Michael tried to comfort her, but her heart was heavy. She knew the truth would never be enough for Daniel. The boy wanted proof. And proof, in this case, meant danger. By dawn, Daniel had made up his mind. If his parents would not trust him with the full truth, he would find it himself. He would go to the river. He would let the water touch him. And he would see if death truly waited for him there. The morning sun had barely risen when Daniel left the compound. He did not tell Ruth. He did not tell Michael. He carried only a small gourd, pretending to fetch palm wine, but his heart was beating toward the river. Every step felt heavy. Every rustle of leaves behind him made him turn, as if someone might be following. Yet no one came. By the time he reached the path that led to the river, his palms were sweating. The river stretched wide and calm before him, its surface glittering in the early light. Children's laughter echoed from the far bank where some were playing and splashing in the shallow parts. Their joy stabbed Daniel like a knife. That was a life he never had. He knelt by the water's edge. His reflection stared back at him, tall, lean, with eyes that carried both anger and sadness. He remembered his mother's words. Water will claim you if it ever touches your skin. Daniel whispered to himself, if it kills me, at least I will die knowing. He dipped a single finger into the river. For a moment, nothing. The water felt cool, ordinary, harmless. He laughed bitterly. So it was all a lie. He cupped his hand and splashed a small drop onto his arm. Still nothing happened. His heart raced with triumph and fury. He leaned further in, ready to wash his whole face. But then, something shifted. A cold wind rushed over the river though the trees around him were still. His arm began to tingle, then burn. The place where the water touched turned red, swelling quickly like a boil. Daniel cried out, stumbling backward. The children across the river stopped playing and stared. One of them shouted, "It is him, the boy who never bathes." They pointed and laughed, not noticing the fear on his face. Daniel pressed his arm, but the burning grew worse. The skin blistered as though fire had touched it. His chest tightened. Panic rose in his throat. He staggered up the bank, clutching his arm, and ran. When he reached home, Ruth saw him and screamed. Michael rushed forward. The boy's arm was swollen, angry red, almost unrecognizable. "What did you do?" Ruth cried, grabbing his face. "Tell me you did not touch water." Daniel's lips trembled, but he could not speak. His body was shaking too much. Michael held him firmly. "We need to act fast. If the curse is true, the water will spread through him." Ruth ran to a calabash hidden at the back of the hut. Inside was a strange mixture of ground herbs and ash she had kept secret for years. She rubbed it on Daniel's arm, chanting under her breath words Daniel had never heard before. Slowly, the burning eased, though the skin still looked scarred. Daniel, weak and trembling, stared at his mother. His voice cracked. "So it is true. Water really wants to take me." Ruth hugged him tightly, tears wetting her face. "My son, this is why I never let it touch you. Not because I wanted to shame you. Not because I did not love you. But because I love you too much to bury you." That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the scar on his arm. The truth had cut him deeper than the gossip ever did. He no longer doubted his mother's sacrifice. But inside him, another question grew stronger. Why me? Who placed this curse, and what do they truly want? The answer, he knew, was somewhere in the past. The scar on Daniel's arm never faded. It was a constant reminder of the day he dared the river. From that night on, he could not sleep in peace. Dreams haunted him, visions of a woman with long hair dripping wet, her eyes shining like silver, whispering his name from the water's edge. "Daniel, come home." Each time he woke drenched in sweat, his mother watching closely, her lips pressed tight with fear. One night, Daniel sat before Michael and Ruth, refusing to be silenced. "I need to know everything. No more secrets. If I am cursed, I must know why." Michael sighed heavily, as though carrying a stone on his chest. Ruth trembled, shaking her head, but Daniel would not stop staring at them. Finally, Michael spoke. "It began before you were born." He told Daniel of the night long ago when he and Ruth had gone to the river shrine, desperate for a child. Years had passed without one, and the shame was unbearable. At the shrine, an old priestess had appeared, her voice deep and strange. "She told us the river could give us a son," Michael said, his voice breaking. "But she warned us, he would never belong fully to this world. Water would always call to him. If it ever touched him, it would claim him back." Ruth wept as she added, "We thought we could protect you. We thought love and caution would be enough. That is why I guarded you from birth, why I bore the mockery in silence. Because I made a vow to the river that night. You were the gift, and the debt." Daniel sat frozen, his chest tight. "So I was born with a price on my head." Michael nodded slowly. "The river goddess wants you as her own." That very night, as though the goddess had been listening, the sky darkened. Rain began to fall suddenly, heavy and fierce. Ruth screamed, pulling Daniel into the hut. But drops of water touched his skin, and at once his scarred arm burned again, this time spreading across his body. Daniel writhed in pain. His skin glowed faintly under the storm's light. The whispers from his dreams returned, louder now, "Daniel, come home." Ruth held him, sobbing, refusing to let go. "You will not take him. He is my son." Michael, desperate, remembered the last words the priestess had spoken. Only truth and sacrifice can break what the river binds. He looked at Ruth, then at Daniel. "There is only one way. We must return to the shrine. Tonight." Through the storm, they carried Daniel to the riverbank, his body weak and glowing like embers. The water rose high as though welcoming him back. The goddess's figure appeared above the waves, beautiful, terrifying, her hair spread like flowing currents. "He belongs to me," she said, her voice echoing like thunder. Ruth fell to her knees. "Take me instead. Spare him." The goddess's eyes narrowed. "Would you give your life in his place?" Without hesitation, Ruth stepped forward toward the water. Michael tried to stop her, but Daniel, barely breathing, whispered, "Let her go, Father. She has carried this for me all my life." Ruth entered the river. The waves swallowed her instantly, and then, silence. The storm ceased. The glow on Daniel's skin vanished. He could breathe again. The curse was gone. But his mother never returned. Years later, when Daniel told his story, people finally understood why Ruth had never allowed water to touch him. What they once mocked became a tale of sacrifice. A mother's love so fierce that she gave herself to the river so her son could live free. And every time Daniel stood near the river, he swore he could still hear her voice in the waves, whispering, "My son, stay alive." Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe and turn on your notification for more. See you soon.